Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time. How's everyone this morning? Let's see. 67 people. Or 67 of my favorite kind of people. Some people are under the impression that monks are not supposed to have preferences. Yeah. Monks need to be wary of preferences and not create suffering around preferences. But I do have preferences, especially for good people. So it's feeling a little warm this morning. I'm going to have to get a lighter shawl. So, not much in the way of news today, other than I put in the chat before we got started that the recent talk that Ajahn Sona gave, I believe it was last Saturday, has been edited into a nice video, beautifully produced, and put up on the Ajahn Sona channel. So people missed that talk last weekend. The title, I believe, is Equanimity in the Time of a Pandemic, or something along those lines. Visit the Ajahn Sona channel for that. Also, I got a sneak peek at the first video in the jhana series. And I think Dantika, who I hope is here this morning, has outdone herself. It looks very beautiful. And it's not your standard Dhamma talk. It just Ajahn sitting in the meditation hall in front of a microphone. So there's a lot of work that Dantika and others put in to making it a bit of a visual contemplation. So I'm looking forward to that. And of course, I'm going to remind people again, that's going to be premiering on Sunday. I believe the time is 1 p.m. So they'll put the premiere up on Ajahn's channel probably before the end of the week. So people can look forward to that. So let's see. I see how everyone's doing here. Give me a chance to look at the chat. I have a clarification of a question that came up yesterday that I'll go to in a moment here. Let's just see how everyone else is doing. George, good morning. I see you have a question you popped in here early on. So, stop that sound. Ajahn, can you please speak to recommended daily chanting and simple resources for them? Sure. We have a 2-volume set of bilingual chanting, Pali and English. Many of the chants are available both in Pali and English, and some we chant in a bilingual fashion where we chant like a line of Pali and then a line of English. And on this YouTube channel, I post we live stream our morning and evening meditation and chanting, and I'm copying and pasting every day a link to a PDF of the relevant chanting book. So if you'd like a hard copy, you might reach out to whatever monastery you're closest to see if they have available hard copies for free distribution. A great number of these were printed 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, and there still should be some available. And it's very nice. It was designed and printed to be easy to use in a chanting ceremony. So it's a hard back, but with a spiral interior binding, so that the pages lie nice and flat, and you can look at them and when you're doing the chanting. So, but in the meantime, you might get the PDF and familiarize yourself with that, George. And then the style of group chanting or puja, devotional chanting, that we do in the monastery is there. There's a special section for the morning and the evening. And just in brief, typically we will do much of that, if not all of that section, and then either add a short reflection chant or two at the end of that, or maybe at the very end of the meeting. So those are typical patterns. So we might do the devotional chanting, recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, to start off the ceremony, and then have our meditation, and then to close the meditation, do maybe one reflective chant, and then pay respects to the shrine, pay respects to the senior monk who's present for that particular ceremony or gathering. So, so that's the approach that we take in our monasteries. There's many other approaches in other monasteries and other cultures. I'm not aware of all of them, but oftentimes people will learn at least some small part of those devotional chants and set up a shrine in their house. And this is even true of people that are not meditators. It might be one of the only formal daily rituals that they do as part of their Buddhist practice is making offerings on the shrine of flowers, candles, incense, sometimes even food offerings or something dedicated to deceased relatives and kin, and then doing some devotional chanting, or some people will even learn some of the reflective chanting. Say the Ratana Sutta is something that's popular in the Theravadan Buddhist world, and I've met lay people that chant that on some sort of regular basis. So those are a few suggestions for you, George. Good morning, Stephanie from Thunder Bay. Nice to see you here. Okay, well, I see lots of greetings and good cheer shared amongst everyone in the chat room, but no other questions. So I'm going to go to this question that Abby asked the other day, and I asked her to email a little bit more detail. So hopefully she doesn't mind me reading the detail of her question, but it's quite a good question and something worthy to kind of contemplate. So let me pull this up here. I won't put it on the screen. I'll just be reading it. So I'll start here. You asked for further detail regarding my question today. I had asked about why it's more difficult to let go of concepts and thoughts about objects than it is to let go of the objects themselves, people, places, things. I'm referring to attachment, clinging, grasping actions when I ask about letting go. An object just is. The attachment appears to be the concept of an object and is a subtler layer of perception and harder to let go of. It would seem as if the grosser level of the object would be more difficult to let go of, but I find the layers of subtle perceptions more difficult, and clinging to these layers appears to be the source of dukkha. For example, a cup, it's hard to read on my screen here. A cup is the object. For example, if a cup is the object, is it a cup one can drink from? It is a cup, excuse me. It is a cup. One can drink from the cup. Now, a layer of thought regarding the cup may be that my mother gave me this cup as a loving gift. It is still just a cup, but in my mind now, it's more than a cup. If I lose the cup or break the cup, now it is painful because of the layer of it being a gift from my mother. If I have just a cup, it is not difficult to let go of that cup. There is no attachment. It can be there or not. If I have a cup that is perceived as a loving gift from my mother, now that is harder to let go of. Oh, excuse me, I misread that. If I have a cup that is perceived as a loving gift from my mother, now the thought added to that object makes it more difficult to let go of attachment to the cup. It is still just a cup. Or is it? Sometimes lately I'm aware that the cup, the object, and the thought about the cup, good, bad, or neutral, are the same, just mental. So, all right. So we have a question here about attachment, and the short answer here is the attachment really exists in the mind. It does not exist in the cup. So, you're correct in assuming it's harder to let go of the mental object, or we would use the word sankhara here in speaking of attachment. And sankhara is a very important concept when trying to unpack sort of attachment here, because it's really, sankhara is made up of volition and contact and intention primarily. And this is the thing that becomes sort of problematic in our relationship to these things. They are not just cups. It is a cup from my loving mother, or it is my cup. It's my special cup. It's the cup that I have an emotional investment in, I don't want to be without. It's my happiness, even. Like, there's some relationship there that is bound up with your whole concept of happiness, and we're not very good at estimating how much happiness that cup really is. So you actually will tend to estimate that your life will be more diminished than it really will be with the loss of that cup. And so yes, like the dukkha that we want to strike at is the internal attachment or the relationship to these things. And important in that is this investigation that you're already engaged in. Like, it's not about the cup, it's about the attachment. So you could give up all the things in your life, and that may make your life simpler in many ways, maybe a little bit more difficult in other ways, but you'd still be left with attachments and the habit of investing in meing and mying, in this misestimation about the things that one is attached to, and how important they are in this kind of broader sort of strategy for happiness and freedom from suffering. So, there's the famous Zen story about two monks crossing a stream, and there's a lady there trying to get across the stream, and one of the monks picks up the lady and carries her to the other side and puts her down, and then they're walking for a good spell or something, and the other monk is furious that the monk has picked up the lady and carried her across the stream. They're not supposed to touch women. And then at some point, an interaction or dialogue around this whole event sort of carries on. And the wiser the monk sort of points out the fact that sort of, yes, I picked up the woman, but I put her down. You've been carrying her all this time. So it's maybe not the best telling of that story, but it illustrates this very kind of point, that the problematic sort of thing is the internal component, what's kind of going on in our mind, and the attachment. And in particular, you really need to sort of look at volition and intention, and how that sort of factors into it, and in particular, sort of its relationship to the self-concept. So this is a place that we get very, very sort of stuck, and not just on external objects, perceptions and ideas. And the self-concept itself is a sankhara. So, there are, that's what's going on when we're creating this kind of identification with one of the five khandhas as me or mine, as myself. And there's attachment to it. And this is a really fertile ground for contemplation, Abby. It's like, where is the attachment? Where's the real problem there? And the other part of your question is like talking about the difficulty in sort of letting go. And there was something, maybe it was earlier in the email, about subtle forms of attachment. And there are places and times and opportunities where letting go can be done in a very intentional and deliberate sort of way, especially when we have a sense of how we're wrongly grasping at something and how it's creating suffering and creating a liability for future suffering. But much of the process of letting go, especially I would say on the more profound levels, is done by the cultivation of the path. So all the work that goes into developing selfless generosity and virtue, and cultivating the mind, overcoming the hindrances, developing serenity of mind, and discrimination, the wisdom faculty, that does a lot of the heavy lifting, you could say, in alleviating, dissolving, empowering the mind to let go of subtle forms of attachment. The mind is just so fast and complex and nuanced. You cannot rely upon a mere act of will and awareness. So, we need to cultivate a very strong and profound awareness to study these dynamics and to become aware in a way that is direct, non-theoretical, of like where it is that we really are stuck and where our attachments lie. And we need to be sensitive to that. We need to cultivate the ability to sort of have enough presence of mind that we're watching over the mind in the experience, and we get the opportunity to see our attachments, and akin to the practice of citta nupassana, mindfulness of the mind, we get to see when the mind is attached and when it is unattached. We see when attachment is present and not present. And we can witness this very act of discovering how we're attached to something and then letting go. Especially as our practice matures, and the more we have a kind of heedfulness around that and a sensitivity to sort of the unnecessary suffering, or how unskillful it is to acquiesce to this attachment, or not resolve the various attachments of mind. And if you can't, if the mind isn't sufficiently strong to just let go, then you just redouble your efforts at cultivating the path and be patient. So just scanning over the conversation here, some of it relevant to what we're talking about. And it's a very notable teaching of Ajahn Chah, where he talks about some cup, some precious cup. And, one who has wisdom sort of knows all along that it's already broken. They're strong in their ability to see things, see these characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta embedded in their experience of the world. So, and that's part of what's informing this kind of skillful or right way of relating to our experience of the world and the things of the world even. So objects, no matter how beloved and pleasing they are useful, or even carry a certain sentimental value, they're anicca, they're dukkha, anatta. They're not here to last, and they are dukkha. They are unsatisfactory. So, and they're not self, meaning there's not a whole lot of control over that. And that's where we go wrong, as we're loath, you might say, to see and relate to the stuff of life in those ways. Our tendency is to see the opposite, to see these things as permanent, satisfactory, and self. And here I would emphasize, in terms of self, like that we're a bit deluded about our ability to really control it. So, and control it for a sense of meaning, happiness, pleasure. So, I've had an interesting practice around things being broken in the monastery. Partially based on having been exposed to that teaching of Ajahn Chah early on. I guess it sensitized me to this sort of sense of how silly it is to create suffering around those things, especially when one can see and accept the truth of these characteristics. And it's just a complete waste of time to get angry at yourself or angry at others. These things are bound to break, and accidents happen, and even heedlessness happens. So, but it's not a good reason to suffer. It's not a good reason to get angry. It's not a good reason to get abusive to either self or others. And it kind of happens in the monastery all the time. So Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's another person. And it's unskillful to be heedless, but it's all broken. It's all death-bound. It's all bound for dissolution. And it's all not worth suffering over. Good morning, Ivy. Thank you for referring me to Ajahn Sona's meditation instruction videos on YouTube. Very helpful. Good to hear that. Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at those. Those were some of the first videos we did. And the content is good. And the videos are okay. I think the skill of everyone at Birkin's improved greatly since we made those. So to me, they're showing their age. Okay, let's see. A couple more and then I think we'll have to wrap it up for today. Ajahn, in order to develop faith in awakening, we first need to accept that we suffer. Otherwise, we wouldn't want to come out of it. How would you recommend the acceptance of dukkha? Well, it's really the first noble truth is like to acknowledge it, and to acknowledge it in its kind of in its fullness. I think the tendency for people is to diminish, to turn away, to dismiss, to justify, to acquiesce to much of the dukkha that is embedded in your average human life. And I think one of the things that's most refreshing about this formulation of the four noble truths is like, the Buddha has the maturity to tell us the truth. Rather than just telling us pleasant stories or wishing for a better tomorrow. He's very straight and square about this noble truth of dukkha. And in the formulation of the Four Noble Truths, he kind of goes through in detail, just calling this out, which gives us the opportunity to sort of look and examine and just accept the fact that our lives are threaded with and embedded with unsatisfactoriness. I'm not really sure. It's an interesting question. Like, how do you get somebody to the place where they can open their, like, really open up to an acceptance of the truth of that? So, I think it's difficult. I think either people kind of already have the karma or the sensitivity to intuit that, and in coming upon the teaching or coming upon the formulation of this kind of first noble truth, it makes sense to them or it doesn't. I'm not really sure how easy it is to kind of usher one over the threshold if they don't have a sensitivity to it already or can't sort of see it. It's not something that's easy to argue. So I don't know. I'm a little bit. That's an interesting question. I'm a little nonplussed about coming up with some confident way to recommend the acceptance of dukkha. So, because also it's not just about accepting dukkha. It's really that dukkha is something that is conditioned, that arises and ceases, and there's this opportunity to overcome. And that's a much harder piece to kind of communicate or induce faith in that, in somebody who doesn't have faith, or the conditions yet are not sort of ripe for that. So the most powerful way is coming into the presence of somebody who exudes a kind of freedom from suffering and a lightness in being. Good morning, George. You just extinguished the last cigarette. I hope for support detaching and letting go from that addiction. Very good. Very good. May it be so. Only you can make it the last cigarette. So, but may it be so, and publicly making commitments and determinations can be helpful. So, morning, Ken. Years ago, I worked through a book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. When things were going well, it was a pleasant, clear feeling and mind state. Would you call that samadhi or samadhi-like? I remember that book. I met that book a long time ago in my very early 20s. I think we could say it's samadhi-like, but we should add a little distinction there. We're not just interested in samadhi, we're interested in samma samadhi. So, which in short is samadhi that is in service to this greater kind of goal of understanding and overcoming dukkha. So, but there are many experiences that we have as human beings that are samadhi-like. It isn't such a completely exotic conscious experience in the human mind, and my belief is that, at least in theory, everyone's capable of it with the right instruction and effort and supports. It's naturally a place where the mind goes, and it's interesting to think about that story that we have in the suttas of the Buddha as a young boy going and sitting under a tree and slipping into jhana. So we can easily kind of write that off as just, well, he was the Buddha. He had all these perfected paramis. And there's a certain truth to that, but these are natural states of mind. They're difficult to develop and master. So, but they're not completely foreign to our experience. Mastering them and let's say developing the ability to experience them in strong and profound ways, that's supernatural. But the state itself is, I think, is one that is natural and not so foreign to us as human beings. We just don't experience the perfection of it or the fullness of it so much. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up there, folks. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you all tomorrow on the morning coffee. So be well, friends.